Hey everybody, welcome to 30 Ways to Happy Days. I'm Alani Yvonne with Truly Great Life, and we are on way number 14. Way number 14 is the character strength of forgiveness. This is a big one. If you have not listened to ways number 1 and 2, I recommend that you check them out. They are kind of foundational to all of the ways, but let's jump in. So forgiveness. I'm sure if you've been alive on this planet for more than a few minutes, a few years, if you live long enough, you have strong opinions or reactions to that word, forgiveness. All right, so before we jump in, why don't you think for a second about what it means to you, what comes up for you when you hear that this is actually a way to a happier day, that this is a strength, that this is maybe a muscle that you have that you use a lot, or maybe it's a muscle that you don't use that often at all and don't even think you've got and one iota of forgiveness in you. Well, one of the things about these ways that we're talking about is everybody has them. Everybody has them, and the question becomes, what do you do when you know that this is something that's part of your human makeup? And then it's a question of how you use it, or when you use it, if you choose to use it or learn about it. So with forgiveness, because it is, I think, a tricky one for many of us, what are you holding on to that you're kind of not sure how you feel about it? All right, so let's start with, definitions. How do you define forgiveness? So again, we're kind of taking this from the approach of positive psychology, the lens of positive psychology, and that defines forgiveness in ways that include mercy, being merciful. It includes when you accept other people's shortcomings, when you are able to give someone a second chance. You let go of hurt when you are wronged. So these are some general descriptors of forgiveness. How do they land with you? What do you think about those? Now, it's important to know forgiveness does not mean condoning or forgetting. It doesn't necessarily mean you're pardoning. It's a little distinct from that, okay? So when we use our strength of forgiveness, and think if you are a person or if you know somebody who has maybe this is one of their top character strengths, they are very high in forgiveness, okay? So the research has shown that there are a lot of physical benefits actually for people who, kind of tap into that character strength of forgiveness. Even if it's not a top one for you, there are psychological benefits, and it helps with a sense of well-being on a spiritual level. There's healthier behaviors perhaps. That you can maybe stick with more easily if you have forgiveness. And generally speaking, people who use forgiveness, people who are forgiving, they tend to have, let's say, less anger, less depression or anxiety, definitely less hostility than those who are less forgiving. So, where it gets complicated is when you feel a sense of injustice, personally or in a group or on a macro level. So where are you able to see the possibility of bringing forgiveness into a situation you may have, whether it's in your family, your personal life, your work, school, societally, that you feel forgiveness is not an option? Where do you your gut reaction is like, that's beyond the pale. That's just a non-negotiable. That's a line I'm not willing to cross. What they did is unforgivable. What they did or said is something I cannot forgive and forget. So think about something that you're going through right now, either in your personal life or your professional life or in the culture and society, that you feel strongly either way about forgiveness. And then think about how that translates into your sense of well-being or happiness on a daily basis, or on whatever it is you're going through. A lot of times when you are not able to forgive, there is a holding on to, right? That can be maybe heavy. There's a holding on to of something you're not willing to let go of, or don't know how to let go of, or feel threatened perhaps by, what does that mean if I let it go? What does that mean if I let go of this wrongdoing that has become part of me, that if I were to have mercy or to give second chances or to give, what would that say about me? So where does your ego come into this? Where does your sense of justice and right and wrong come into this? What is at risk? Sometimes when we feel it would be really hard to forgive, there's just things to think about there, depending on, what your situation is. And then what if you have wronged somebody? What if you've wronged somebody? Do you know how to ask for forgiveness? That's also a tricky one, right? Okay, so, think about what it is for you. Think about what you are experiencing right now, where forgiveness is a strength you're not sure how to bring in. Either because maybe oh man, if this was done to me, I would want that person to ask for forgiveness, but it's too threatening, or I'm not comfortable. To ask for forgiveness can be very uncomfortable. When you ask for forgiveness, you are acknowledging a wrongdoing. So, one thing that I think can help is, depending obviously on the transgression, let's say, can you separate the behavior from the person? Can you separate the action from the value of the human being? And is that something that within yourself, let's say if you've done a wrongdoing, you can approach then the need to ask for forgiveness, or you've made a decision you are going to ask for forgiveness, to recognize that it's not necessarily indicative of you as a flawed human being. We're all flawed, we're all imperfect, but the question is, can you see that asking for forgiveness and acknowledging a wrong doesn't necessarily make you an unworthy human being? It doesn't necessarily mean you are a terrible human being. It doesn't mean like I don't deserve XYZ. So this would bring in, this concept of self-forgiveness. Again, with all of these ways, it's about how we're interacting with other people, right? How we are going through our day, different situations, but can you also bring it towards yourself? So where is there room in your life? What is going on in your life personally with your own self-awareness, with your own struggles that are getting in the way of you having a happy day, to make it really simplified, where you could maybe use that muscle, that character strength of forgiveness in a self-compassionate way? Where can you give yourself the space and the grace and the recognition that you're not 100% perfect? You're not going to get it right all the time, and you will make mistakes, and that's okay. The question is, what do we do when we've made them, especially if it's hurt another person? Okay? So 3 steps to kind of think about, how can I apologize whether you're talking to a kid or a student or thinking about it for yourself or whatever, start with the feelings, right? What were you thinking or feeling or experiencing when you did the thing that you now feel you need to apologize for, to ask for forgiveness? So you can start by thinking about where your head was at or where your heart was at, right? Like what was going on with you when you did what you feel you now need to ask forgiveness from, okay? And the thing with the feelings is, again, we want to feel our feelings. Question is, what do we do with them? Feelings are not necessarily, like, you are not your feelings, just like you are not necessarily your thoughts. You can decide what to do about them. Okay? We are much greater than the things that we feel or we think. The question is, what do you do with them? So let's say you were having this feeling and you acted on it in a way that was hurtful to someone else. Okay, so think about what it was you were feeling and then say, how did the person on the receiving end likely feel about that? How did my doing X make that person feel? Okay, so again, we're trying to start with where we are and acknowledge that, and then you can step into maybe the other person's shoes, just as an exercise so that you get comfortable with this idea of forgiveness when you need to ask for it, to know it's not the end of the world to ask for forgiveness, even if it might feel like it's the end of your world that you've constructed or, live in for protection reasons or whatever it is. So, how does that other person feel? And then you can ask, okay, they probably felt this, or the other. And an easy way to think about it would be, if that was done to me, what would I feel? And if you would feel differently for whatever reason, then again, think about, well, what are other possible ways of reacting to what happened, how they would feel. Okay, just to start expanding outside of yourself and thinking of how other people might react to that, even if it's not how you would react, okay? And then the second part is, well, what can you do to make it right? This isn't about, oh my God, like self-flagellation, I'm a terrible person, the guilt and the shame and the okay, you may feel some of that, but at some point, if you put your energy and your thought into, okay, how can I make this right? And maybe you can't make it right with that person for whatever reason. Maybe they are no longer here. Maybe they will not take your calls no matter what. You can at least take it as information and make a decision about how you're going to do something different when you move forward into the future, if you come up with, a situation that may provoke that again. So it's a worthwhile second step, right? First is like, what was I feeling? How did that probably make the other person feel? Or if how did that person feel? And then the second thing is, what can I do to make it right? So you can start, with your verbal apology or your written apology, right? You can apologize, but you can then also think about the action beyond the apology, whether it's with that person or that situation, or you're simply learning from the experience and you are going to move forward into a different approach next time, or you're going to do something differently moving forward. Okay, again, that's putting the ball back in your court. We may not have the ability to change the past, not yet, no time machines that I'm aware of. If you have one, let me know. But we have free choice leading up to the moment. And then once the action or the words are out, the question is, what do you do with what you've put out there? Okay? So we can learn from what the impact has been and change because of that free choice moving forward. But this requires some thought, so some forethought, some self-reflection, right? And some self-forgiveness because we're only human, okay? And we are gonna keep growing, God willing, till the end of time, till the end of our days, whenever that is. So can we bring in these other ways that we've talked about for happy days and bring that self-forgiveness in? Okay. So, how can you make it right? And then you can kind of go a little further with that and say, if you had to redo it, I know there's no time machine, but if you could go back in time, right? If you could go back, if you could redo it, what would you do differently? And there's research out there about the benefit of kind of, those mind movies, playing it out, seeing it, smelling it, feeling it, making it real for you. Like, oh, okay, well, I would have liked to responded in this way. Play it out. This is what we have imaginations for. This is what we get to, be creative about. Like, play it out. Make it a little more real, a little more visceral. If it helps, write it out. If it helps, put a reminder where you're going to see it. If this is something that, usually really ticks me off and I tend to do this, then I'm going to do X instead. And maybe it's as simple as like, I'm going to bite my tongue, and count to 10. What are the things we learned as kids? Like, count to 10 before you explode, whatever it is. Okay, so figure out what will help you, how you would have rather responded. Because when we ask for forgiveness, okay, we get to inch closer, we get to shift closer to being our best selves. Okay, and that's part of what all these character strengths in these ways are helping us do, is being our ideal self. Not ideal in the sense of like, I have no flaws and I'm perfect. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being your best self when you're doing your work, when you're interacting with a person, when you're doing whatever it is that you want for your great life, okay? So those are some things that you can do. And it's important to recognize that we are going to feel things and think things that maybe are not going to be helpful for the sake of smooth interactions with other people. And this is where that gap, mind the gap between what you're, that stimulus and response, right? Viktor Frankl, if you're familiar. Take a pause. And then, think about how would I like to be if I was to be my best self in this situation? What kind of end result am I looking for? And go forward with that. All right. So forgiveness is a big thing, and it's an important way. And it's sometimes people, we don't want to look at it because it makes us feel bad. And I would just suggest that you can look at forgiveness as a gift in addition to a strength. Think about a time, and hopefully you have at least one, where someone asked for your forgiveness. Think of a time when someone came with a genuine apology, whether it was a big offense or a small offense, whatever it is in your situation. How did you feel to be on the receiving end of that apology? So there's, this dynamic of being on the receiving end. Are you going to hold a grudge, or are you going to give over what this person who's in some level of pain is seeking? Now, you can argue, well, I don't know how genuine the apology was, and they didn't really understand what they did wrong, and it's possible, right? It's possible it's lip service. If you have kids, or you work with kids, how often, say sorry, how much of it is a real apology? Okay, so this is where, when we take a second to really think about it, we can make it a more meaningful apology. So that's why saying sorry is never really, on the one hand, you can say it's not really enough because you want to know and have it communicated that the person really understands why they should apologize, why they, where they maybe hurt you or went wrong in a way that they now are apologizing. But on the other hand, Is it our responsibility to judge the quality of their apology? I don't know, something to think about. Okay? But there's a sense of, when you're on the receiving end of an apology, there's an opportunity there for some healing. If you're ready for that apology, if you're ready to forgive. So forgiveness is interesting because it's connected so much to whatever work you get to do for yourself, to facilitate relationships with others in your life, right? And if you're not willing to address the hurt, then forgiveness may be hard to bring into the picture. But these are just ideas, okay? These are just ideas to think about. Think about how the idea of recognizing that other people can make mistakes just like you can make mistakes, and obviously depending on the scope of the mistake, right? But at some point, think of this bag of rocks you're carrying or someone else is carrying. Is it possible to give it over? Okay, if you have a spiritual practice or in your religion or whatever it is, this concept of, can you give it over? Can you lighten your load by doing what you can within your capabilities, and then also sharing that load, giving it over to your higher power or whatever works for you? And how would that help? Think about how that might help you. Okay? And you can play with the words there. Like, that thing is forgiving over. It doesn't mean you abdicate yourself of that responsibility to make a change, to be a better person, or to do things a little differently. It doesn't excuse maybe the wrong that was done, but it's really, when you forgive, it's for yourself. Because when we don't forgive and we hold on to grudges, it's something we hold on to. And I'm sure we can all look back in our personal lives, either from things we've experienced or stories we've heard of other family members or other friends where grudges were not ever released. I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if you ever saw the movie, what was it, Avalon? It was about, that came out in the 90s, I think. It's a good movie about families and all the drama and all the relationships and how complicated it is, but there was a grudge that was not let go between families, and then families just don't continue with their tradition of getting together or whatever. Relationships end because of grudges and lack of forgiveness. So if something is important to you, how can you bring your character strength of forgiveness into it? One hint or one tip that is helpful is, if you put the word "if" into your apology, or you receive an apology that has an "if" qualifier, then is that really an apology? I'm sorry if I made you feel bad, or I'm sorry if you took that the wrong way, or I'm sorry if is not really owning what that person might have done and their role in it. It's kind of like putting it on the person who's getting the apology. It's kind of a abdication of ownership of what was actually done and why they really might want to apologize. If you say "if," it's like, well, I don't know why you feel that way, but okay, if I hurt your feelings, well, then fine, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but I don't know why you're so sensitive. So just be aware of if. If you're gonna give an apology, if you're gonna apologize for something, try to take out that word "if." Just one little thing. Now, we are wired to see the negative. I'll wrap up with this. We are wired to see the negative, as I've mentioned in in other recordings. And when we get proof points of something negative, we can sometimes latch onto it and use it as reasons to make decisions in how we think about people or how we approach certain things. So knowing this, knowing that we might be predisposed to kind of write off maybe situations or relationships because we have enough proof points that bad things happened or transgressions happened, where can you make space to consider, again, based on your situation and where you're at and what it is, you decide what makes sense, okay? But I just invite you to consider the character strength, the quality of forgiveness, and how can you apply it, learn more about it, consider it, and bring it into your life for yourself and the relationships that matter to you. So, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, if it's something small, a misunderstanding, work-related, that's also, I would argue, using, your character strength of forgiveness. So forgive me for being a little long-winded here. I hope this was helpful. And thanks again for joining me. And we will talk about way number 15 next time. Have an awesome day.